Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley McManus, Director of Marketing at Affectiva. Welcome to Affectiva Asks, a human-centric AI podcast where each episode we will interview a thought leader doing cutting-edge work in the AI space. A little bit about us. Affectiva is the pioneer of emotion AI, software that can detect nuanced human emotions, complex cognitive states, behaviors, activities, and interactions. And Affectiva is applying this technology to advance the next generation of multi-signal in-cabin sensing. Today's episode features Affectiva CEO Dr. Rana el Kaliouby interviewing Sean Batir, Senior Machine Learning Engineer at BMW, as part of her Virtual Girl Decoded Book tour. Every day, there are more and more exciting developments in the automotive industry, with a lot of automation driving change in the space. Traditionally, the focus has been on what's going on outside of the vehicle. At Affectiva, we're passionate about turning it inward and really trying to understand what is happening inside the vehicle with our in-cabin sensing, or ICS, technology. What's happening with the driver? What's happening with the other occupants in the car? What is the state of the cabin? And how can we use that information to reimagine what the future of our driving and riding experiences will look like? Sean has been in the automotive industry for a while, is very passionate about the future of transportation, and has been a huge champion of the work we do at Affectiva. Sean actually worked with us about 2 years ago when BMW did a project with Affectiva to examine emotional in-cabin experience. He wanted to understand, particularly when people are driving, how you understand if they're falling asleep or if they're fully attentive. Let's listen in on their interview to learn more.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Rana el Kaliouby. I'm co-founder and CEO of Affectiva and author of the book Girl Decoded, which was published by Penguin Random House this past April. So I started doing this when the book launched, and I have continued to do so. So every Wednesday at noon Eastern, I'm live streaming conversations with other innovators and entrepreneurs to discuss themes that I touched upon in Girl Decoded. Everything from emotion AI and its applications, tech innovation, AI ethics, leadership, women in technology, diversity, and of course, the importance of global perspectives in technology and business today. For today's conversation, I'm super excited to cover a topic that is very timely, and there's a lot of disruption happening in this space. It's the future of transportation, and specifically our in-vehicle experiences today and in the future. The automotive industry is undergoing a lot of disruption. There's a lot of exciting developments going on and a lot of automation that is really driving change in this space. The focus is usually what's going on outside of the vehicle. And at Affectiva, we're very kind of passionate about turning it inward and really kind of trying to understand, well, what is happening inside the vehicle? What's happening with the driver? What's happening with the other occupants in the car? And how can we use that information to really reimagine what the future of our driving and riding experiences look like? So for today, I'm super excited to welcome my guest, Sean Batir. He is a senior machine learning engineer at BMW and has been in this industry for a while, is very passionate about the future of transportation and kind of comes to it from a number of angles. He's been a huge champion of the work we do at Affectiva and a big believer. And I'm very excited to have you with us today, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks, Rana. Yeah, I mean, it's because you guys have an awesome product. So,
so I thought I'd actually start by reading a little excerpt from the book, just to set the stage. And then, Sean, I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at BMW. So I'll read real quick. I figured, this is pre-COVID, right? So I figured that I spend about 33 days a year driving my kids around to their extracurricular activities. That's a lot of time driving a car. And it doesn't include the amount of time I spend commuting to work every day. I still want to spend the time with my kids, but I would much rather be fully engaged with them while we're traveling than focused on my driving. If I didn't have to be driving, I would be catching up with them, watching the news, reviewing homework, putting the time I would be spending behind the wheel to better use. But I would have to be very confident in the technology before I felt comfortable doing this. I'll admit I'm not there yet, but I think we'll eventually get there to the autonomous vehicles. The average American spends close to an hour every day in a car commuting back and forth to work. Imagine what your commute would look like if you didn't have to drive, and instead you got into your car in the morning and it didn't look like anything like the interior of cars today. With an AI in charge, It wouldn't need to even have a steering wheel or traditional passenger seats. Instead, the interior would be designed for multiple purposes. This morning, you'd select the office mode. Take out your laptop, sit in a desk chair with a seatbelt, spend a half hour or so prepping for the day, doing work or making calls. At night, you'd select the spa mode. The desk would turn into a sit table, office chair into a lounge mode, sink into the chair, put your feet up. Sensing that you're tired, the AI system would lower the lights and release a calming lavender scent into the air. Close your eyes, listen to relaxing music, and doze for half an hour. Or maybe you would read an engrossing novel, a memoir. You'd have your virtual assistant arrange to have sushi waiting at your doorstep for when you get home. And when you pull into your house, you'd feel refreshed, ready to spend time with your family. Isn't that better than sitting in traffic?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, I love this vision that you paint in your book. And I think this is a vision that quite a lot of people want to see, right? You're totally right. I think we spend over pretty much an hour a day in commute.
Yeah. So tell us about a little bit about your background, how you got into automotive, and what do you do at BMW?
Yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Sean Batir. I worked with Rana about 2 years ago when we did a project with Affectiva, and we were looking at sort of the emotional in-cabin experience, particularly when people are driving. How do we actually figure out if they're falling asleep or if they're fully attentive? And we talk about this a lot, or Rana talks about this a lot in the book. But to just finish out your question, my background is I actually also went to MIT. Some of this back here. Anyway. Yeah. So I was at MIT in 2014 and I studied neuroscience. And then I was in the UK, also like you, Rana, both at Imperial and at Oxford, not Cambridge. But we were focusing on the rivalry. Yeah, I was,
I actually didn't know that I knew that you were at MIT, but I didn't know the Oxford part. That's very cool.
Yeah. It was like bio-entrepreneurship, like bioengineering. So I was actually interested more in this like human-machine interface at the time. So sort of like the theme of my life has always been like, how do we connect humans with machines, or how do we basically augment humanity to go beyond our like physical and our cognitive limitations? So that's like kind of why I love like what was happening when I heard about you at Affectiva, because basically, right, we are thinking of using emotion AI and computer vision to make us better as humans. Like we're not trying to replace it, but just augment it, sort of like superpowers that we see with like modern day superheroes in Marvel and DC world.
I love that angle of augmentation, because that's definitely the lens we see it as well. So how did you end up being in the automotive industry?
You know, it was actually a very chance twist of fate. So I was actually in the middle of a PhD program, and I just went to a conference, and at the time I was just wondering, how could I maybe apply some of this computer vision? And then I just got reached out to by a recruiter. So it was very interesting to get a little bit mystical on you on this call. I think a lot of it has to do with like getting clear with intention. The truth is I basically got really clear on where I wanted to go. I was like, okay, so I want to be applying AI in a manner that allows me to augment humanity. And I didn't like have the details specifically of like auto industry, but I did have like the general domain. And I got like clear about like the style of work, right? I was like, I want to be working in this innovation lab where I am, working on experiments, collaborating with companies like Affectiva. That was actually on the like manifestation meditation list.
I love that.
Yeah. And then literally 2 weeks later, this whole interview process just began.
I will talk about that a lot in the book too, this idea of an entrepreneur or a founder having faith, because you're often painting a vision of the world that hasn't yet existed, and you need to bring people on board, and that takes a leap of faith. So you have to have that kind of, you have to, I guess, coexist with uncertainty and embrace building this vision of the future. So question. So how do you think about human-machine interfaces in the context of a car? And where do you see the future going?
Yeah. So, there's been a lot of active debate within BMW and also just within the automotive industry of like how each company wants to frame the individual in context of the car. So in general, right, humans, we convey a rich canvas of emotions through our face. And that was one possible approach to look at how you can augment your own abilities of getting from point A to point B with enriched data from the facial canvas. So, for example, let's say that I'm trying to, get from my home in Palo Alto to my office, which might be in San Francisco. If I was doing that and I started falling asleep because it's 5:30 in the morning, and the canvas in my face might have, monikers that could be detected by some variation of like an LSTM and RPM, like regional proposal network. So basically my face will start like becoming kind of droopy, and then, over 5 seconds it freaks out and then begins to sort of enter a collaborative model. And the vision would be that the car could, maybe intervene and say, hey, Sean, you're falling asleep. I'm going to be more vigilant. And then maybe like you could increase some of that autopilot capacity.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting because the Affectiva, we talk about the autonomous vehicle continuum. So the L1, L2 is kind of where, the cars we have today, right? You've got driver is pretty much in control with a little bit of assistance, maybe all the way to like L3. Well, you've got the semi-autonomous and this kind of transfer of control between driver and car. And then of course, L5 takes us to the fully autonomous world. What is the role of AI throughout this, and emotion AI in particular, throughout this continuum? So we talked about driver monitoring, which is here and now, I would say. Can you take us into the future a little bit?
Yeah. So now this is just purely like my own speculation / understanding where the literature is. The vision of having vehicles that can just take you from point A to point B with zero human intervention. Technically, I don't think that's impossible because what's limiting is actually our like city and our municipal infrastructures, as well as potentially governmental support, depending on the country you're in. Because you need to have like real-time update of the highway. You need to be able to gather all that information of like the context of all other drivers who are in the, say, scene. And this allows us to have close to full information of the vehicle's context. The difficulty is that requires integration of sensors, and that requires like integration with, systems that are just beyond the space within your car. And so that's more of an administrative human issue that is blocking that rather than purely the technical. We have seen these latent capabilities in like some military and defense applications. So really the money is there, and a good amount of the technology exists as well. It's really coordinating people to make it happen. Now, that said, something that like also just pops up into my mind is, it was actually when I was meeting you for the first time, 2.5 years ago. After I saw you, I met with Brian Reimer, from MIT's Age Lab. And I remember even distinctly, he said something, I don't know if Brian, if you're on this call, shout out to you. But, he mentioned something about how actually the more you automate, the more you need to educate where, when, and how. And that also is quite important because again, this brings the responsibility back to the human.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Say more about that.
Yeah. So it's like, the idea is, yes, our technology can be in a place where if there's full information, we can create a very simple path navigation from point A to point B. But the issue and the responsibility again falls to the human. Because as you said, if I'm in this scene where I'm in my vehicle and I'm just chilling, like, doing work email and I have no wheel, but then I'm not paying attention. And then let's say the entire communication system in my 50-mile radius shuts off. Well, if my car is like reliant on that, and if I haven't been educated on the risks,
right,
and of these edge cases, then you're, in the worst case scenario, dead. And in the best case scenario, you emerge like just softly injured. So again, there's a huge element of like human responsibility actually. As we move towards L5, one of the risks, and I think why many people are fearful of promoting the L5, L4 vision, is that it requires us to relinquish some of that control, which we as humans like naturally seek, to machines. And also, if you are relinquishing that control temporarily, there's that sense of like unbounded responsibility, particularly that we need to like maintain our own like, responsibility of like the fact I am consciously engaging in this L4, L5 vehicle. I know the risks, and I also know how to intervene if I suddenly lose communication, or if my car's AI system suddenly fails, or if the GPU that this is running on fries.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? So,
I think this is especially kind of critical in an L3 universe, which is actually like way closer from a timeline perspective than an L4, L5 world, where on a day-to-day basis, there will need to be a seamless transfer of control between human, co-pilot or driver and the car. And you need these two systems, right, to be in sync. And from our data, we've seen that, when you have a semi-autonomous vehicle, humans kind of have a tendency to take a back seat and not be as vigilant, which is interesting. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned to me about humans not being vigilant in semi-autonomous systems, it reminds me of a line in your book, actually. I think you mentioned that the CDC reports that about 94% of all serious auto accidents are due to human error. But even more than that, we then sort of discussed in the book, how there's this handoff step. Right? The act, in fact, is human beings won't completely be out of the driver's seat anytime soon. And part of that, I think you had a really, really salient example, because I do this every day. I'm in California. Is like you're driving, you're at a stoplight, you're in a suburb, and suddenly you see someone walking their dog, and you have that human, like 1-2 second decision of like, you look at them, you either flag them or you go.
Right.
And that element is a very human thing. Like, I don't think we're going to be putting eyes on vehicles in the front seat, right? So
how do you replicate that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. How do you replicate it? And does it make sense for like these like edge cases to, that's an open question, right? The first pass in my mind, just because you asked on this live call, is, maybe you create some form of like integrated sensor notification system. Yeah. So the vehicle is there and then someone like is also locking. We assume they have a phone and they get a notification. But as soon as I say that out loud, probably myself and people in the audience think that's insanely over-engineered, because instead of building this entire like data fabric, I could just also look at them, which is like the data fabric that we have as humans that we've been blessed with emotional intelligence and awareness over like 200,000 years of evolution.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think of it as having like a shared mental model, right? Like like we all have this shared mental model of what it's like to drive or to be in a street or a road with other animals and pedestrians, etc. And how do you build that same shared mental model in the vehicle of the future? And what kind of interfaces that seem naturalistic and not annoying and overtaxing or confusing? So I think it's a really like challenging and interesting kind of, space to be in.
Yes. Actually, Rana, you made me realize, in terms of building shared mental models, this ties to a really interesting opportunity that I kind of see. I don't know if you've heard of Unity, but they work on like, virtual and augmented reality. Yep. One concept and idea that would be very cool, in fact, is the idea of building a sort of shared mental model with your vehicles by maybe having these multiple agents, with these agents being cars. And then you can actually like learn how maybe that shared mental model of a space is evolved over time. And what's nice is like in a platform like Unity, in this virtual augmented reality context, you can actually iterate over multiple instances, and you get free space and time because it's in a virtual reality. It's not in our physical world. And so that might be interesting to create a sort of like prototype, right? Like a prototype shared mental model of how do vehicles interact with human agents moving in a scene.
Yeah, it's this whole space of simulation and data synthesis, which is a lot of what Unity's focused on right now in the automotive space, is just so fascinating. We're actually thinking of dedicating one of these live streams to just this topic of simulation and data synthesis, because I think there's a lot of innovation happening there. It's such a key enabling technology for the machine learning space, because we need to be able to simulate and generate all this data without waiting for it to happen in real time. Some of it is really sparse, right?
Yeah. And I get chills when you say this, Rana, because we were just talking about like shared mental models and sort of vehicles talking to each other. The interesting thing too is like as we're like moving forward in this decade, in the 2020s, I'm starting to see that like a lot of these companies that are popping up, Affectiva, Unity, NVIDIA, like all of you guys actually have this beautiful opportunity to sort of build this like shared mental model and connect what you have together. Because I'm thinking about mastery like a little bit, and I'll tie this. It's the idea that like you are, an innovative leader, and your domain of mastery is sort of like in emotional intelligence and how we bring that to computer science, how we actually implement that and help people do that, right? Using neural networks, using region proposal network, RNNs, LSTMs. However, you have other people like maybe perhaps Jensen Huang, who is like cream of the crop. Contribution to society was the popularization of an affordable GPU, which would have been laughable 20 years ago. And then also we have Unity and Danny Lang there, focusing on how do we actually virtualize this. Well, all three of these are essential components if you want to link that together and bring it to a vehicle, right? And I see that as like a huge opportunity because it's not only like machines that are like in the sort of swarm intelligence, but we as humans like also have our own instance of swarm intelligence. We're much more intelligent together. And we have the capacity to sort of like collectively build off of each other's mastery in order to make something greater than ourselves.
I love that lens of it. Like there's a number of core enabling technologies that have brought us to this point in time. And it's only through close collaboration and kind of building on top of each other that we're able to materialize a lot of that. I love that. We have an annual training and mentoring program at Affectiva. And this year we've gone virtual. And we've been able to bring on 53 trainees and also sign on about 20 graduate mentors to help with the program. So, 70 plus young people in our program. And when we were crafting it, it kind of coincided with Black Lives Matter. And as a team, we really said, you know what, we're committed to making sure that we're going to reach out and make sure that we extend beyond the typical network that we're able to reach, right? And make sure that we are tapping into communities who would never hear about our, marginalized communities that we wouldn't cross their path. And we were able to reach out and just get people, maybe even people who don't have any coding experience. We have a number of the trainees and the mentees who, they have never coded before, but we still wanted to be inclusive and bring them on board. So lots more to do on our end, but we're definitely committed and starting with baby steps in ways where we think in our universe we can, make some progress. How about you? Like, how do you think about this, especially in this reskilling world? How do we make, this space of machine learning more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, so the fact is the industry still is predominantly like male. So that's like something that like we need to, actively strive for to change. And, this is a little out of the scope of the discussion, but I would like to, encourage all of my female colleagues out there. Like you have people like Rana as inspiration, and there's definitely a seat at the table that should be there for you and is there. And, maybe more broadly speaking, and, actually specifically at Outco, we are trying to bring opportunity to people who would otherwise not have the infrastructure or support to have access to things like computer science education. And I think we acknowledge that that's something that is a key area of focus. And then what I also wanted to mention, is the quality of data that we collect for our models. And I'm not talking about BMW, but just in general, like in computer vision, if we're building machine learning models that focus on emotion recognition. And I think you guys do a really excellent job about this. I'm at Affectiva. This is part of the reason why I wanted to work with you, when we did a demo a year and a half ago. But for all those tuning in on the call, Affectiva does a really great job of making sure that they sample data across all different types of ethnic groups. Because the fact is, if you train a model to only recognize white faces, if it sees a non-white face, I mean, you can get very like questionable outcomes to potentially like offensive. Like I've had like, an ML model like that was training and thought I was a monkey because I'm brown. Right. So I'm just like, which is like, obviously like I'm not offended by that because that's just how the model is operating. Like it classifies me as out group. And it's out group because I'm not part of the training data. Right. So it really does mean something when people say we want to build inclusive data models. I know that for some people who might feel a little bit like fatigued about the whole BLM movement, like it could be a little eye roll inducing, but the truth is it is a real issue. And, it is something that even as machine learning engineers and scientists, like we do have a responsibility to be docents of it. So
I can't underscore this enough. Totally spot on. Because the inclusivity is in the team that's designing and building these models, because we all have our own blind spots, and the more diverse the perspectives, the better the outcome's going to be, and the more inclusive it's going to be. And data is absolutely a huge part of it. I mean, we've seen that in our business where we've kind of taken on the role of educating the industry, right? It's because often it's not done on purpose. It's just an oversight, but it's
right. It's often not malicious. It's
Correct.
Just like the convenience. It's like, oh, I'm in San Francisco, so let's just sample the population. When you realize that we like have misrepresentation and the population in SF is skewed a certain way, you'll end up oversampling the mean shifted population.
Exactly. And you have to be really thoughtful and be very mindful and purposeful about making that data inclusive as possible. So I want to bring us back to the world of automotive. So let's imagine that Emotion AI is already integrated into our vehicles. And so our cars have this amazing in-cabin sensing AI. It can sense the driver's state. It can sense how many occupants are in the vehicle. What are they doing? What's their activity? Are they eating, drinking, sleeping? Can you talk a little bit about what that unlocks in terms of personalization and maybe even kind of the convergence of health and well-being with the automotive space?
So we said very early about I think 20 minutes ago that the face is the rich canvas for information, but you're totally spot on. I think if we can also get pose estimation, then we get a lot more information about, how people by default spend their time. In fact, you can tell, and we know about this from human call, that in 30 seconds, you can tell someone's level of confidence.
Yep.
Well, certainly have a canvas into those most private interiors, aka their cars, especially if you're on the West Coast. then you get that data. I'm not referring to BMW. I'm referring just in general to whoever is building this. The car gets this data. Yes.
Yeah.
Assuming that it is there is now a potential to either use this data that we gather with your consent, of course, right. Maybe potentially recommend or help improve your condition in life, right? You can kind of tell if someone is going through a depressed window, especially if we have historical data on them. They normally had big, broad postures or just took up a lot of space, but then they suddenly switched over and maybe anomalously were a little bit more reticent, perhaps for a few days. If that could be a potential early warning indicator, that we could then maybe also connect to clinical data sources. There's a really nice interplay that could exist if we take elements of lifestyle, particularly how we are in a car, and with, of course, again, consent. That also requires massive infrastructure upgrade, though. And that's more, again, on the part of some form of governmental program, potentially. Or perhaps a startup could appear, establishes that bridge.
Yeah, I'm just super excited about what this is all going to unlock around the riding experience, right? I think it's just going to create a whole new type of experiences and personalize depending on your mood and depending on who else is in the vehicle and how the car can be optimized for all of that.
So yeah, I think, I'm hitting 14 or 15 weeks now in this shelter in place in California. And it's fascinating because I've actually gained a lot of time because I'm not driving. I think I lost 2 to 4 hours a day driving.
Wow.
And so yeah. And it kind of goes to show that if we can bring back some of that productivity element into life, you can really enhance again how we can contribute to society. Or it doesn't even have to be productivity, but it's even that ritual of just breaking up the day. Yeah, some of my colleagues and I, feel days are almost becoming longer because where I'm sitting right now is also where I relax. Right. It's not just work mode, it's also play mode and it's everything mode. So building in that ritual of trying to break apart your routine, having the car as the instrument through which we engage in that ritual, I think there's a lot of potential there to make us more mindful and more efficient.
Absolutely. All right. So Sean, you talked about how you kind of sent out vibes into the universe and ended up in your job at BMW doing innovation around human vehicle interfaces and kind of reimagining the future of transportation. What's your advice for young people who are tuned in and are looking to get either into the automotive space or the machine learning space? What would be your top piece of advice?
Okay. So if you're interested in getting into the automotive space, My advice to you would be like explore what are particular problems that you want to solve. You'll likely find alignment. I mean, there are at least like 10, if not 20 very large automobile companies out there, and then dozens more startups. If you can identify a specific problem, all automotive companies are always looking for people to help. The issue of why maybe your application disappears is because it's just vague. Like you say, you want to work in automotive, but what does that even mean, right? Like, what's the mission that you want to be working on? I think mission alignment is really key. And this almost ties to the second part about like getting into machine learning. Although I will say for machine learning, the easiest path, if you have time on your side, I would strongly suggest one study like math or some form of STEM in high school or in college or in grad school, because that will give you the foundation. But all this is really tied, I think, to all of this. And I mentioned this, a bit earlier in the call, is identifying your unique soul print. And so that's like, what are like Rana el Kaliouby's like founding values? Like, what are my, as Sean Batir, like founding values? Like for me, I mean, just to get a little bit personal, right? For me, like one of my really key goals is to always be evolving. So if I can sense that I can't evolve in a position or a place or a context, then I need to move into a place or a location where I can continue evolving. Because when you figure out what your unique soul print is, and it's usually a mixture of 4 to 5 very core central values that you defined very early in your life or during a traumatic experience. If you can figure out what your soul print is, then that becomes your guiding light. And it helps you like really clarify, how you want to make an impact on the field of AI or in automotive. So, yeah.
I love this. Soul print, identify your soul print, identify your core values, and then align your mission. Love it.
Yes.
Great advice, Sean. It was awesome having you today here. And hope to continue collaborating and working together. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Rana and Sean's discussion had some great points on what the in-cabin experience will look like in the future and the role that emotion AI plays in this. They spoke about the technical capabilities of the technology today and how the automotive industry can strive towards a shared mental model between cars on the road for a fully autonomous future. Most importantly, they covered the intersection of well-being and automotive and how vehicles can help us arrive in a better mental and emotional state than when first buckling in. To see more, watch the full live stream on Rana's Virtual Book Tour YouTube playlist or visit her website at ranaelkaliouby.com/girldecoded/virtual book tour. Sean Batir also delivered a technical workshop at our 2019 Emotion AI Summit. Check out the Affectiva website to watch his session and see more about his work at BMW, and visit his YouTube channel and Medium to learn more about his science and engineering outreach. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Affectiva's Human-Centric AI podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes. We are also on social media, so please reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Affectiva to share any feedback you have on the show and weigh in on the discussion using hashtag AffectivaAsks. Don't forget to rate us and comment with your feedback to help make the podcast more discoverable for others. Until next time, thanks for listening.